When and where did you play your first gig?
The very first gig was actually the whirl-y-gig in Shoreditch Town Hall. I think that was that would have still been 1993. I'd sent a tape, cassette tape back then, to DJ Monkey Pilot, and he asked, "Do you want to do a gig?" And that was pretty terrifying actually, because I hadn't done any gigs before, just some very poor recordings done really on 4-track and using the computer as well, linked to the 4-track. So I was like hideously unprepared really. So that was all done using an old Tascam 4-track, which you could use as a mixer, and plugging in a couple of keyboards. I did that gig with Chris, called himself DJ Zach at the time, Chris Hunt. We didn't sort of stay together very long. We had a few disagreements about creativity and how much input, each of us wanted to put in. So, after a disagreement, that was the end of that. We only did one gig, which was the whirl-y-gig one, which was, we had to use sort of a tape backing track for some of it because, the chorale music, the cello I'd actually recorded myself, of course, but I couldn't really do it live because I didn't have the setup to mic up everything. So I used a tape for that, and then sort of a combination of sequencing and live effects and keyboards. So it was not 100% live. It was about, 15, 20 minutes. That was absolutely terrifying because it was a huge audience. There was like 1,000 people there. And for your first gig, that was just so scary, and I was terrified it would all go wrong. Fortunately, the technology didn't let me down. I had this crappy, it was an old Atari, an Atari ST-FM with a mono sampler. It was 16-bit, but it was only mono. And that was sort of a plug-in module, physically plugged into sort of a port on the Atari, and that had an output that went into the mixer, and it was operated with some like really bad clunky software, but it worked. I managed to make it work. Incredibly primitive by today's standards, but somehow we pulled it off.
Did you actually play live, or did you use CDs, DATs, or some other backing?
Yes, we did play live, actually. It was difficult because, it's really hard to do dance music actually as a live thing, because you're dealing with sort of mechanical beats, really. You're using a metronome when you record. And when you play live, you've got to be absolutely bang on time with everything, because in most cases you do have to use some kind of backing track, because reproducing sort of, something like a Roland TB-808 live is virtually impossible. I mean, we did use live percussion. Both Demian and Katie played, real percussion live. But they had to keep in perfect time with the rhythm track that was already there, which is, same for myself. I was playing the bass or keyboards. You have to be absolutely bang on, otherwise you can hear it. And the same with Demian. He played electric guitar live, and he'd in the recordings played the saxophone, again against the metronome backing track, and it has to be spot on. So it was really a combination. There was sort of sequence tracks which were all mixed live, at the same time as playing real instruments live and synthesizers live. So it was kind of difficult because I'd have to do a lot of things one-handed. So I'm using one hand to mix these 16-channel mixing desk and control the the mix, the volume, and the panning, and all that kind of thing, and effects, and use the other hand to play the keyboard. In fact, I even used to play the bass one-handed. I found that by doing what's called hammer-ons, you can like hit the strings in the right place, and you don't have to use your right hand to pick. You can just hammer the strings. So if it's a simple enough bass line, you can get away with playing it one-handed. So you can use the other hand for doing like sort of delay effects, or playing a keyboard part, or for just mixing. So it was really, really difficult because I upgraded my crappy sampler to an old Akai sampler, an S950, which was great, but you had to load up all the sounds using a 3.5-inch floppy disk. And again, with the Atari, when you had to load stuff up, you had 3.5-inch floppy disks, so there was a lot of faffing about. And I was limited to 16 channels, which was, at times difficult to have all the sequences running and the live stuff at the same time. But you can make it work. It's not difficult. If you have the more people you have, obviously it can be a bit easier. But to reproduce an old Akai sampler, an S950, which was great, but you had to load up all the sounds using a 3.5-inch floppy disk. And again, with the Atari, when you had to load stuff up, you had 3.5-inch floppy disks, so there was a lot of faffing about. And I was limited to 16 channels, which was, at times difficult to have all the sequences running and the live stuff at the same time. But you can make it work. It's not difficult. If you have the more people you have, obviously it can be a bit easier. But to reproduce dance music completely live, you probably might need 5, 6, 7 people all playing simultaneously to not have any backing of any kind. So that's like really, really difficult to do. So we did play live. Everything was live as much as possible, but there was a small amount of sort of pre-programmed backing, which was sequenced and then mixed live. Because there were 3 people, you couldn't really. There's no way you could reproduce every single bit of it from scratch.
Musicians always have stories about gigs that went great, gigs that were horrible. What were your best and your worst gigs?
I think probably my best gig, certainly for myself in terms of excitement and enjoyment, was playing at Heaven, Megatripolis, Heaven in Charing Cross. There was just like an amazing atmosphere, and the gig went really well. There was like a great crowd, so actually was a slight technical cock-up where I think I put my bass down on the ground and I forgot to turn it off, so there was a big rumble of bass for a few seconds till I muted it. But strangely, it kind of worked in that it seemed like it was just an effect rather than an accident. So that all was fine. But yeah, that was a really exciting gig. And I suppose really, the WOMAD gig in 1996, that was on the whirl-y-gig stage. That was the 3 of us together on a beautiful, hot, sunny day. That was really good fun. Although again, there were some slight technical difficulties. The guitar strap on my bass broke, and I had to like perch the bass guitar on my knee. But other than that, it all went pretty well. There was a couple of bum notes here and there, I think, which you can actually hear on the live recording, which proves it actually is live, because you know, there's a couple of little tiny mistakes through the set. But you know, that's what happens when you play live gigs. There are sometimes some actual mistakes, which most people don't really notice, but I always noticed them, and I'd be annoyed. But you know, you get away with it. I think the worst gig ever was a benefit. It was, I think, at a time after there was a new law being put in. I forget the name of it now, which was like very restrictive of people's freedoms. And that was in about 93, 94. I forget the name of it now. It was like given some fancy name like the Social Justice Act or something, but it was the opposite, really. So there was a benefit gig for raising money to try and oppose this, and my Atari kept going wrong over and over again, and the crowd were getting really leery and pissed off. So I was just fiddling around doing sort of acid house type sort of arpeggios on my keyboard while Demian was furiously drumming, and you know, it was obvious we were trying to fill up time while I tried to sort things out. What it was is the bass was so heavy that on these big bass bins, it was actually making my computer go wrong, and I fixed that by sticking it on top of a load of polystyrene, which kind of cushioned the, you know, the vibrations, and then we were able to carry on with the rest of the gig. But you know, I thought it was like it was going to be a riot. We were going to get like lynched or dragged off stage. So that was really nerve-wracking. I used to get very nervous anyway. I think for the first dozen or so gigs I did, I used to get so nervous I'd just throw up, and that was just like horrible. But that one was particularly bad in that, it was just really nerve-wracking, and it worked out okay in the end, thank God. I suppose the worst thing ever was I actually did a charity gig at Brixton Academy, which was like the one and only time I played there, and the mixing desk literally sort of blew up. There was smoke coming out of it, and of course, without that you can't play at all. There was no other spare mixing desk, so you know, as soon as I saw the smoke coming out, I switched it off, tried it again, but it was completely blown, and that was it. I didn't get to play at all, which was very disappointing, because you know, it's an iconic venue, and I would have really much enjoyed that, but it wasn't to be. And that's one of the problems, you know, technical problems with gear breaking down, especially with electronic music, can be a disaster.
Obviously, playing music live has its risks. Do many dance music acts play live, or is it mostly miming?
Of course, there are some, you know, live dance music acts, but you know, it's really difficult to recreate the, you know, your songs exactly the same as in a studio when you're doing dance music. If you listen, there's only one live recording I've actually got, which is released, the Well Mad Whirl-y-gig one. But if you listen to that, you can hear it's not the same as the original recordings. You know, it's close, but you can't duplicate it. You just really can't in a live setting exactly like the record. And to be honest, I wouldn't even want to. But you know, one of the telltale signs is when you go to a gig and you hear the so-called live recording, and it sounds exactly the same as the record, or more or less, you know, 99% the same, then that's usually a sign that they're cheating, that it's not live. Another sign, I'd say, is if you can't see them doing anything, if you can't see them playing any instruments, that's usually a sign that they're not playing. And also the other thing, you see people moving sliders or turning knobs, but sometimes the sound isn't changing. There's no actual change in the sound. So that's clear that they're not actually doing a live mix, they're just sort of miming it. And there's quite a large number, unfortunately, of bands that do mime, that they're doing like a performance as opposed to actually playing live. You know, one of the problems is actually when you're playing live, it's really hard to do sort of the dancing or sort of interacting with the crowd while you're in the middle of actually playing a solo or something. You just you need to focus on what you're doing. So when you see these acts when it's all like interaction with the crowd the whole time, how can you be doing that constantly and concentrating on playing like a complex part? You can't. So it's quite clearly in many cases it's just miming. I mean, that's not to say all dance acts are doing. There are dance acts that do try to reproduce their music properly live, not just relying on a computer or, a backing tape or CDs or whatever, and sort of faking it. Some people today even still do try to do a proper real live show. And fair play to them, because, I mean, it's easier now than it used to be, but because the technology's improved enormously, but to help you do that. But you can't fake an actual instrument being played. So, if you're going to play live, you've got to be able to actually play the parts of your songs. And unfortunately, a lot of people just take the easier part and just cheat.
Is there anything you'd have changed about your live shows if you could go back to the early 1990s?
Yeah, there are a few things I would have liked to have changed. We're doing live mixing and playing at the same time. It's really hard to put on a good show, So I really would have liked to maybe, done something like the Prodigy did when they had dancers. Or of course they later on went into doing vocals as well, but it made it kind of better. And I would have loved to have a good light show, which I never really managed to get that organised. I really used to love sort of like the Pink Floyd stuff, some of their visuals, from their live shows, and even like live at Pompeii. And it would have really fitted well with the music to have had like smoke machines and strobes and moonflowers and all that kind of stuff, and put on a great show. There's a rock band I went to see called Spiritualized, which is like really pretty spaced out stuff. Different genre, of course, but the visuals they had for a live show were absolutely stunning. So that would have been about that time, really, the early 90s. So if I'd had the opportunity to create something like that to go along with the music, it would have made the shows a lot more exciting. So yeah, I would change that if I could.
Must